Hi all, and welcome to this session on user administration in SAP Business One. My name is Richard Calvo, and I'll be guiding you through these steps today. First of all, let's decide when it's necessary for you, the customer, to be familiar with user administration and setup in Business One. It is necessary if your Business One deployment is on-premise. This means that you bought the server, we've installed it for you in your office, and you are administrating everything that has to do with creating users, assigning their licenses, and getting them up and running. It's also necessary if you have a deployment that is hosted by a third party, but you are still in charge of administering all of the user setup. It's not necessary if the deployment is a cloud-based deployment. This includes third-party and SAP-hosted Cloud Control Center deployments. It's also not necessary if you're using a reseller that completely manages the entire deployment lifecycle for new users. Here are the common set of tasks that you need to perform if you are administering your own environment. First, you need to create a new Windows domain user. Then, create a new Business One company user. Then, you would link these two together. This allows the domain user to be the one that logs in and has access to the Business One companies. You would then assign a license, authorizations, user defaults, UI modifications, and form settings if necessary. To create a new Windows domain user, simply log on to a new Windows domain server, open the Active Directory, add the new user by selecting an organizational unit and right-clicking New User. In this screen, you'll set up the username and their logon name. This centralizes the onboarding and decommissioning for all of the companies. That means that you have one place where you go to set up the user, pause their access, or remove their access completely to the Business One landscape by simply removing their access in the Windows Domain Controller. This has the added benefit of allowing us to hide companies that a user should not access. It also diminishes the occurrences of "I forgot my password" requests, and it allows you to manage all of the permissions for PDFs and attachments in the systems from the Windows domain share environment. Next, you'd set up the Business One user. A super user would log into the company desired, set up a user code, set up the username for the user code. This is necessary to log on to any company. That's because the Business One user is the one that receives a license from SAP and gets permissions assigned to them. On this next screen, we can see how we're linking the user logon name, which was J. Smith, to the Business One user code accountant, allowing J. Smith to log into the company using his Windows account, J. Smith. This allows our end user, J. Smith or John Smith, to access all the resources, including the Business One client, Data Transfer Workbench, and the mobile apps using just their domain account without having to remember the Business One user code, in this case accountant, or the Business One passwords. It also hides the companies that the user should not see on their logon list. This is the only deployment method available in Cloud Control Center deployments. We also highly recommend it for on-premise deployments. Next, it's time to decide which license the user should have. Licenses have different functionalities. In general, the professional license has all of the functionality available in the system. This means access to every single one of the modules that you might see on the left-hand side or the menu structure inside the Business One client. Every named user, in our example, the named user is accountant, needs a license to access functionality. The available licenses can be viewed in administration, license administration. The screen on the top right shows you the components tab, which tells you how many licenses you've purchased, installed into the system, when their expiration date is, and how many are available. Any license assignment you made takes effect immediately. A license assignment gives a user a base set of functionality, so a base set of modules that they can access in the system. For professional, that means all modules, but for financial, that means only finance-related modules. Next, we'll have to assign authorizations to this user. If the user was created without the checkbox for super user, then by default, they have no authorization into the system, even though they already have a license. They can try to open the modules, but they'll be blocked by an authorization restriction screen. So these authorizations further restrict the available functionality for a user on top of what the license allows them to do. Authorizations can be set at a group template level or on the individual users. The authorizations can be read or write. This means that you can restrict the user in opening a screen, but not editing any of its contents. Authorizations are completely bypassed if the user is marked as a super user. And as we said before, any newly created users that are not super users will have no authorizations by default. The minimum suggested authorizations for any user are document numbering, numbering series, and the particular objects they need to access. For example, business partner master data or a sales order. Effective authorizations will take the highest authorization value for a calculated authorization. This means that if a user has a group authorization, which says that they cannot access a particular module, but they have a specific authorization on their user account that says that they can, then the effective authorization is that they can. This also works the other way around. If the user has no authorization, but the group that they're assigned to does, then they still can access it. Next, we'll define user defaults. This is an optional component, but it's a good idea if you want to have a user that has a baseline setup. Examples of what we can define in user defaults include which warehouse to set on documents, what print preferences. For example, when they add a document, do we want it to automatically print out the PDF? Do we want it to automatically email the PDF? And display settings, including languages, fonts, font sizes, and colors or backgrounds for the company that they're logged into. In this example on the right, we've set up a user default and assigned this user to it. This means that anytime they create a document, by default, the document will be assigning warehouse 01 on the document lines. On the bottom section, you can see another example where the default says that the font size will be 9, but the user has set their particular font size to 12, which means the default will be overridden by the user. We can also assign UI modifications or customizations. These can be at the user level or these can be at the group level. This allows us to modify, hide, show, or reposition content on many, but not all, of the screens of SAP Business One client. They can be configured on the user, or they can be configured centrally on a group and then assigned to as many users as you want. These assignments can overlap, and the system will try its best to create a modification that applies all of the group's settings. A particular UI template customization requires assigning customized forms to the UI. A UI template can further be tweaked after the fact by an individual user who's already consuming it. First, we have to configure a UI user group. The company does not come by default with these configured. You can set these up under Administration, Setup, General, User Groups. Here we're adding a user group called Auditors, which we'll then assign to any auditor. On the bottom right, you can see that for now, we're assigning only the user accountant, our John Smith Business One user, to this group. On this screen, you can see that we are now creating a UI configuration template, not the group that we created before, but the template called master data. In here, we'll group the forms that we want to modify that have to do with master data. In this example, we're only modifying the business partner master data currently. We're then assigning the group we created earlier called auditors, which currently only includes accountant or John Smith, to this template. Once we go back to the form, we can edit it. And in this example, we're moving the orders balance field from the right-hand side of the screen to the left. When John or any user that opens this screen and is assigned to this template sees the screen, they'll see the orders field on the left side instead of the default right side. The user is also allowed to make changes on top of the changes they're inheriting from the group. They can do that by opening the form and clicking Tools on the toolbar, and then Edit Form UI. In this example, the user is trying to disable the foreign name field on the screen because they don't use it. Once they save that change, you'll see that we have both changes. The orders on the right-hand side are no longer there, but they're on the left-hand side, and the foreign name is disabled. The foreign name edit will only apply to the particular user that made it in this case, not to the entire group. We can also assign form settings to the users or groups. Form settings apply to the display of tables on particular screens. This can be any table. It could be the contact person's listing, the list of items, the addresses, so on. It allows the reordering, hiding, and disabling of these columns. The form settings can be applied to a UI template group, like earlier, or copied from an existing user. The form settings icon on the toolbar opens the form settings window. If a UI template is assigned to the user, it'll be selected from the dropdown, or you can change if they're assigned to multiple UI templates. To reorder a column, all you have to do is click it, hold it, drag it, and then drop it into the new position. To show or hide columns, you can click the visible checkbox. To disable this so that it's not editable, you can click the active checkbox. Note that the active checkbox is not available for all fields because there are some fields which are brought onto the screen that you cannot manually edit. If you're unhappy with the changes you've made, you can click the Restore Default button and restore the default setting. This only applies to the current form that you're on, for example, the sales order form or the business partner form. Any subsequent log on to the system will remember these settings and your forms will already be ordered for you. In the example below, we've disabled the other fields we don't need and only left the line number, the item number, and the quantity. As previously mentioned, it's possible to copy the form settings from an existing user to another user. First, browse to the user that has the desired form settings ready. Then click the Copy Form Settings button. A new screen appears where you can select users to copy the settings to. Select the target user, check the box, press Copy, and then confirm the copy. Select the target user, press Copy, and then confirm the copy. Now the system will copy the settings from the original user you selected to all of the users that you selected as targets. The license and authorizations work together to determine what a user can do, but they're not the same thing. Technically, a user with a professional license, which is allowed to access all of the modules by the license, can still be restricted by authorizations set on the user if they are not a super user. Remember that a super user overrides all authorizations set on them. The screenshot on the top right shows you what a license error looks like. So if you've got the wrong license to try to open a particular window or perform a particular function, you'll get a red error on the system message log at the bottom of your screen. And you can review these errors by opening the system message log with clicking on Tools, System Message Log. These errors can only be resolved by changing the license that the user uses. That means either upgrading a limited license to a professional or assigning an existing professional license. This is not a configuration issue in the system. The only way around this error is to assign the correct license needed to perform the function. The screenshots on the bottom right show you what an authorization issue looks like. And these are just a matter of reconfiguring the user by setting the correct authorization. They typically show up like this. For a marketing document, it'll say first define the numbering series in the administration module. Or for master data or other forms, it'll say permission override. You are not permitted to perform this action with a particular object name in bold.